Hey everybody, this is Will Ashton, your usual co-host of Cinemaholics. I am here. I had this set up already for a instant take I did for A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan biopic, which I think I'm currently embargoed on, so that one might take a little while to come out. But I realize, as I'm already here, that I never got around to doing my thoughts on Maria, which was a Netflix biopic that Pablo Larraín did that I saw last month. I guess this wouldn't really be an instant take per se, because I saw it, like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think it's going to be on Netflix soon if it's not already. I think it already had a short theatrical run as well. But yeah, I mean, this is another sort of addition to I guess what you can call an unofficial trilogy of Pablo Larraín's. He did Jackie before that, the Jackie Onassis biopic with Natalie Portman, and then after that, he did Spencer, which is the Princess Diana film with Kristen Stewart. And this is continuing that sort of trend of focusing on these sort of, I don't even want to say sort of, like actually pretty tragic public figures. In this case, it is a opera singer known as Maria Callas, and this role is played by Angelina Jolie, and what is becoming now a fairly uncommon acting role. I know that she's been, kind of focusing on her personal life as well as focusing on projects behind the camera. So whenever she does act, it seems to be kind of a rare occurrence. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure I did actually catch this in a press screening, because, it seems also rare that we see a movie starring Angelina Jolie that's not like The Eternals or a Maleficent film. Or I don't know, like I was gonna say a Kung Fu Panda film, but I don't even think she was in the fourth one. I think that was one of the big reasons why that fourth movie didn't really work for me. It was actually one of the bigger disappointments for me this year, but that is neither here nor there. So as I was saying before, this is a sort of unofficial trilogy, I like to think, because each of these movies, they obviously take a fair share of liberties with the source material, or in this case, the lives of these famous now past women. And in the case of Jackie Onassis, it is a sort of look at a woman coming to terms with this insurmountable loss. In that case, obviously, the death of her Kennedy, or a death of her husband, John F. Kennedy. And then in terms of Spencer, the Princess Diana film, I think, I don't know. I mean, I kind of go back and forth on which one I prefer, that one or Jackie. I think I kind of prefer Jackie a little bit, actually. But I think that one, the approach to that one was, I think, a little bit more interesting in the sense of you're dealing with a woman almost coming to terms with the fact that she is going to die, or that there is this sort of almost haunted quality to her life, and in the sense of insurmountable loss that is coming outside of her control, and the idea of like fame kind of being something that she can't really wrestle with and can't quite control, and she's contained in this house and she's sort of sequestered to this life that is not something that she thought it would be, even though she married into it. And as far as Maria goes, it's in a similar vein, I guess, to Spencer, but it's more about a woman kind of accepting the death that is about to come. And it's a sort of nice and maybe not the right word, a sort of kind of poetic way of exploring these, I guess, internal lives of women that, I are in a superficial way very public, but have always been a source of fascination because we can only know so much about them. And this movie, obviously, it fictitiously sort of looks at this, and I'm not saying that as if it's like pure fiction. Obviously, I think it takes from source material that I can gather and whatever we can reasonably know, but it takes a fair share of artistic liberties as well, because Pablo Larraín is someone who, is indulging in some sort of artistic flourishes, especially at this point in his career. I don't know if anyone listening has seen the film No, which I think is still maybe his best, or certainly one of his best, with Gael Garcia Bernal. And that is a biopic, but it takes a very sort of, slice of life approach. And I think he really excels at that when he wants to, but I think he has desired a sort of more, a larger in life, kind of more cinematic approach, which is not that wrong. I think that's interesting in its own right. And this movie, I think it lends itself to that approach pretty well, because it is based on the life of a former opera singer, not former in the sense of like, I think she wants to be retired, but rather there's this desire to want to be in the spotlight again, but also this fear. And she deals with a great share of mental illness. And there's this whole kind of running storyline about whether or not she is having these communications with a group of journalists, a video crew that is looking at her life and trying to make this documentary about her. And, it's also written like Spencer was by Stephen Knight. And I think he's a fine writer in his own right. I don't know if he always sort of works the best with Pablo Larraín. And it's an odd thing to say because I did like Spencer, and I'm ultimately fairly positive on this film as well, even though I think it's the weakest of these three films. But I do feel like maybe his flourishes tend to kind of get into the more sort of melodramatic side of Larraín as a filmmaker. And I feel like, even though I think this movie lends itself more to that operatic quality, as I said, those melodramatic qualities, better than Spencer, where they felt a little bit more jarring and kind of graded against what I felt worked better about that film, which is the more sort of naturalistic, down-to-earth qualities of this larger-than-life persona. I think this movie, it sees Larraín kind of trying to lean into that in a way that makes sense given the subject and source material, but at the same time, I feel like there is a sort of airiness to this film that, I think it makes it sort of inapproachable in a sense. I think it's a lovely film to look at. It's shot on film. It looks positively gorgeous. And I think Angelina Jolie does a very nice job. There's a good chance that she will be nominated for Best Actress for this role. I don't know if she necessarily deserves a win. I would hope somebody like Mikey Madison takes it instead. I think that's a kind of more live wire, invigorated performance. But, this is a very thoughtful, intuitive, and ultimately tragic performance in its own right. And I think Angelina Jolie, really relishes the chance to kind of play this tormented character in a starring vehicle again. And it is really honestly kind of a breath of fresh air to see her in a role like this again. Like I said, it's so rare that we see her in stuff like this that it feels genuinely sort of nostalgic to have an actual star like this grace us, even though I think most people, for understandable purposes, will ultimately see it on Netflix or in home more than they're likely to have seen it in theaters. But, I think Larraín, as he has in the last few films, I feel like his last one I'm a little bit more fond of than the last. I think, was that El Condón? Or, yeah, was that what it was called? The vampire film? That was also a Netflix production. That film, I think, also, kind of, I think, flourished with that sort of like stylistic sort of mystique kind of quality. I think that one works maybe a little bit better than this one, just because that is a deliberate sort of satire, and I think that movie needs to have a sort of remove from the characters because it's lampooning this sort of almost supernatural take on this very powerful political figure. Even though the story of that one gets really messy, I think that movie benefited more from having that sort of distance that this movie, I think, it's really trying to get into the character. I think it doesn't always work, but I think what makes it work more than not ultimately is Angelina Jolie's performance, which I ultimately found to be pretty moving and touching. I'll admit that on a personal note that like I saw this while I was kind of grappling and grieving with a death in the family, and I saw it as a means of escape, but I don't know if it was necessarily the best thing to do in that time. I don't regret seeing it, but I think maybe I'm a little kinder on this film because it was hitting me in a, sort of tender spot at a difficult time. And maybe that's why I'm a little bit kinder than I ultimately should be, given the fact that, I am coming at this with the fair share of criticisms, but I'm also recognizing that I think this is a quality, a film of good quality and a film that's worth seeing. I don't think it's one that's going to really last long. I think it's the type of film that is more likely to kind of be seen for, awards catch-up purposes, and I don't know if it's going to quite have the legacy that either the actor or the filmmaker have obtained at this point. But it's a solid little operatic, melodramatic biopic of sorts. I think it does tie nicely, like I said, and the way I appreciate the most as a continuation and conclusion to that sort of unofficial trilogy of films that Larraín has made over the last decade or so. I think that's all I really have to say. I tried to keep it brief because, like I said, it's it's been a little while since I've seen this film, and it's not as fresh on my mind, even though I feel like that's kind of counterintuitive to the idea of doing an instant take. But I feel like we're not probably going to get around to doing an instant take or a full-out review of this on the podcast. And like I said, it seemed like going to be a pretty big awards film in some respect or another, so I figured it was worth sharing some thoughts since I saw the film and I was privileged enough to see it screening. And yeah, that's all I have to really say at the moment. Bye-bye.